For over 20 years, the Atlantic Mayors Congress has provided a forum for exchanging ideas and a unified voice for municipal leaders in Atlantic Canada. The Summerside edition has a particular focus on addressing housing and homelessness, with sessions engaging community, provincial, and national perspectives.
I'm Alan Dale from Gale Force Winds, and what an absolute pleasure it is to be here on day 2 of the Atlantic Mayors Congress. You know, a lot of great conversations happen around, a lot of sharing of ideas, people really making a difference in their communities, making a difference in their province and their country. These people are leaning in to solve problems, and I love the collaborative nature of it all. But why don't you introduce yourself, and not that you need much introduction, and tell us what you're up to.
Thanks, Al. Lisa Raitt. I'm the former cabinet minister in the Stephen Harper government from 08 to 15, then in opposition 15 to 19. I work with CIBC now, but I'm here because I was the co-chair of something called the Task Force on Housing and Climate. We produced a blueprint for better and more housing, and we came here to talk about it today with the Atlantic Mayors at their invitation, and we're really grateful to be here.
Well, that's great. Give us a bit of a snapshot about what you talked about.
So today what we wanted to highlight are the 4 big things that we said are the game changers in terms of moving forward. You got to define the problem first. The problem is we need to build 5.8 million homes before 2030 in order to deal with the crisis we have. And it is a crisis. I think that's one of the first things I want people to understand. We are in a housing crisis, and it ties to whether or not we're going to be able to have a good economy that functions, and whether or not we can retain our kids here in Canada as opposed to losing them to somewhere else where they can buy a house. So that's the problem. We hope we have some solutions. 140 recommendations at all orders of government, municipal, federal, and provincial, because finally it's recognized we're all in it together, and it is a crisis. So we're hoping to work together. And you know, we had some good questions from the mayors today, because they're dealing with it at the very, very ground zero. They're the ones that have to balance developers with communities that may or may not want to have more density. But the things that we talk about is you have to make density legal, meaning get rid of those barriers to people being able to build more or higher in certain areas. We want to make sure the building codes are good, because if we build these 5.8 million homes and we do it the old way, the way we've been doing it, we're going to add 100 megatons of GHGs to the atmosphere. And we don't want to do that, because we're trying to do better. We also say maybe we should do things differently. Instead of that one home being built at a time kind of thing, let's talk about manufactured housing. And that seems to be making sense. And then the final one is, basically, don't build in a floodplain. You know, think about resilience and make sure that you're only building a house once, because as we like to say now, and we've stolen it from Minister Sean Fraser, the most expensive home is the home you have to build twice.
You know, I love the way that you sort of have this great vision of it all, and the team put this thing together, because a lot of the folks that you spoke to in the room, as you so rightly point out, they're on the cold face of this thing. They don't have time to get up high like this and look at all of these things. But your group is bringing in these sort of this broader perspectives to say, here's some recommendations, here's how we can see you move forward. And they're learning from one another as they go, As one moves forward in one area, the other might catch up there and learn from those things. You must see that play out all the time in your conversations.
I do, but I'm going to give Atlantic Canada a really big thumbs up, because the level of, I mean, look, obviously I'm from Cape Breton, I love being home here, but the level of cooperation I'm seeing in here and the willingness to talk about ideas is really remarkable. You see a lot of, I'm not hacking on my Ontario municipalities, but there's a lot of competition amongst them, and they're bigger and they're more important. But here they truly want to learn from one another, because they have the added, I would say, difficulty or complication that it's a small population. The towns and the cities here are much smaller, but they still want and need the same resources. They still need to have the public libraries. They need to have the recreational places. They need to have the downtown core businesses. And you got to balance it all with having enough housing for the people who are coming back home or deciding to move here. So I think they're learning from one another, and hopefully they're seeing the courage from one another. Now, in Nova Scotia, elections are coming up in the fall. And I know that is always on the mind of politicians, including me, when I was in action. And I hope that the work that we did at the task force gives them a bit of cover to do the things that need to be done, by saying, look, this is a big problem and it's been defined, and I'm just implementing what experts have told me to do.
This conversation is brought alive by the Atlantic Mayors Congress. That group of people had the vision to say, okay, let's start capturing some of this conversation and build a library of success. I do want to pull on a string there with you. You talked about Atlantic Canada. Minister, tell me, what is it about Atlantic Canada that people want to work together so much? It's like they truly understand in this part of the world that a rising tide floats all boats. They want to see everybody be successful. What is the secret sauce?
I think we're an ancient culture. Honestly, I mean, we settled on the East Coast before we settled anywhere else. We were the first ones that came over. We've seen it all. We've seen economic boom. We've seen economic bust. And at the end of the day, all you know is you got your friends and your family and your community to work together with. And although you got to admit, we can have good fights, especially in families. Like, people will not talk to each other for decades. But we do understand that common thread that at the end of the day, you pitch in together. And I think, just a complete aside, I think that's why you see the overpopulation or overrepresentation of Atlantic Canadians in our Canadian Armed Forces, to be honest, because we understand the importance of working together for a common goal.
Wow. Now, you've been around the block, you've seen a lot of good things.
Hey, calling me old, buddy?
No, I'm not saying that. Big stories of success that resonate for you right now. Give me one of those.
Just one I heard right now. The CAO of the Cape Breton Regional Municipality, which you would not think to be highly progressive, just came over to me and said, we've passed new bylaws, and it's all the stuff that you guys talked about. We've got a new plan with respect to density. We've eliminated parking minimums, and we want to see how it's all going to work out, because they do have to build housing there. They had the influx of international students, felt the crunch, saw the impact, and now want to do what's right. So I wish them all the best. And if it works, then I think it's going to be a remarkable story to look at. The second one, if I may, and we didn't talk about it today, but we really should, is the success in Indigenous communities in getting housing right on the West Coast right now, where they have more autonomy on their lands and they have their own planning process. They don't necessarily have to go through the city of Vancouver for all those approvals. That can take a lot of time, and they're pumping out a lot of housing in a shorter period of time. And I think that there's a lot of lessons to be learned there too.
Listen, it's been an absolute pleasure to be in conversation with you. Good things and good people always come out of Cape Breton.
Thank you, sir.
Real pleasure having you on the show.
Appreciate it.
For over 20 years, the Atlantic Mayors Congress has provided a forum for exchanging ideas and a unified voice for municipal leaders in Atlantic Canada. The Summerside edition has a particular focus on addressing housing and homelessness, with sessions engaging community, provincial, and national perspectives.